It's Not a Boy, Chapter 8, Part 3, Holidays. And at the end of the last part, I read to you about going away to Scarborough, which was so unusual for our family. We hardly ever went away, but this was a Sunday school trip, and we went only for one day, and I got lost. And so we carry on. I didn't know what to do. I saw so many heads, so many striped deck chairs, and so many kids rushing about with buckets and spades. I searched up and down frantically, but I'd completely lost my way. I couldn't even find the rock shop that I was in a minute ago. Hot sun was beating down on me, and I could see a massive blue patch now. It had grown even more and would make a very big suit for a very big sailor. "Unlucky for some, number 13, shouted the bingo man. And suddenly I saw old Mrs. Fox with her bingo tray. And there was Charlie and Lenny and the brothers. But Mr. Fox was nowhere in sight. I wondered what on earth I could do, and I shouted frantically to them, but the crowd surged. "Hey, Charlie!" And he looked up from his tray of numbers and saw me and laughed. But I was pushed on by the crowd, and the Fox family disappeared. I was all alone in the world, with everybody rushing past me. I raced on, and I was going away from the prom and towards a sort of park. I was in a panic. I kept thinking that our little yellow bus might go back home without me and leaving me behind in Scarborough, and I would have to stay the night, a dark, cold night on my own. And then anything could happen. I could hardly breathe with worry and took great gulping breaths. But by the time I reached the green trees at the end of the prom, the crowd was thinning out, and I could catch my breath and calm down, and I decided to look for anybody that I knew. Suddenly, there was Mr. Fox coming towards me. His shiny suit glistened in the sun, and his oiled hair shone like a halo. He was all smiles. Maybe he was changing into a guardian angel for me. But no, he was not, because he wasn't even looking at me. He wasn't smiling at me. He was walking arm in arm with the ice cream girl. They were staring into each other's arms. I waved and shouted, but they only had eyes for each other. And they crossed over the road and walked away and disappeared up the leafy slope, stopping every now and again to kiss. Now I was really on my own and had to decide what to do. I looked around carefully, and though I didn't see anybody, a plan came into my head in a flash. And this is where you will be surprised at childhood logic, or maybe not. It wasn't an adult idea of keeping safe, but I thought it was a good idea. I went up to a tree in the park and sat down in the shade on the grass with the knobbly trunk at my back. I clutched my 2 paper bags, my rock breakfast, and my plastic yellow Scotty dog. And I watched, and I waited and waited. Then, after a long, long time, I saw them, coming like I hoped they would. I saw them weaving through the noisy crowds and heat. I saw a bright red dress fluttering and flying down the prom like gentle flames, making their way towards me. It was Susie, running and pointing with her mam. Her mam was following behind in a hurry. She was so close now I could see Susie's sparkling hair slide and glass gemstone from the ring that she had bought and put it on her finger. "I knew you'd be here," she shouted, wrapping her warm arms round me, and we all looked up at the grafted trunk and then up and up into the leafy branches. I had chosen to sit by a weeping elm, of course, and I knew that Susie would recognise it from her own garden. My plan worked. Mam was waiting anxiously on the sands, and I was sure that she was pleased to see me and pleased that I was safe. But she gave me a look like the one she gave Mr. Fox when he got on the holiday bus. But I didn't think I ought to wink at her like he had done. Then it was time to go home at last. We packed our things, shaking sand from everything, and struggled back up the hill to the bus park. There stood our yellow bus, patiently waiting till we all got on and settled back into our seats, ready to go home. Except that we could not go home because the Fox family hadn't come back. They weren't on the bus. We waited and waited, and still they did not come. The bus driver got out and walked round, smoking another cigarette. Then he paced up and down impatiently. The sun was getting low, and we were cold. We put our macks on. They'd come in useful after all. And we kept on staring out of the window and down the streets, hoping that the Fox family would turn up at last. Then all of a sudden, there they were, strolling across the car park, eating fish and chips from greasy newspaper wrappings. Loping Lenny was hugging a big teddy bear that he'd won on the bingo, and Charlie was pulling a mongrel dog on a piece of string. He said that he'd found it on the streets and he'd claimed it for his own. He kept tossing it at Chip, and the dog tried to catch it as it dragged along on the string. But we were not on our way home yet, because Mr. Fox had not joined his family. "Oh, leave him," laughed Mrs. Fox. "He has other fish to fry tonight. He gets up to all sorts of things when your back is turned." And so, at last, our bus driver pushed the gear stick and our bus set off from Scarborough to grunt and groan its way home. I was pleased to be going home at last. Going on trips was all very well, but it was not always safe, and guardian angels were not always there when you wanted them. Anything could happen when you went away. And of course, I didn't get anything to put on my What I'm Good At list, because you didn't have to be good at anything on Sundays and on Sunday school trips. Guardian angels and Auntie Martha loved you whatever you did. But as you know, I really wanted some things on my What I Am Good At list. One thing that did please me, though, was my little dog Charm. I put it on the bracelet that night as I snuggled up on my straw mattress. I put it next to my wren and ballet dancer and the rose. And then I finished reading my story about the 3 little puppies at last. And of course that last dog did get a home. A little boy, all raggy and poor, chose the dog and got him cheaply because nobody else wanted him. And so that pleased me as well. Now everybody was safely home at last, except of course for Mr. Fox, who had been left behind in Scarborough. Mr. Fox did not come home for a very long time. And when he did, surprise, surprise, he was married to the ice cream lady. And they all lived together in their little terrace house, with the boys and Charlie and Lenny and the mongrel dog on a string. Oh, and Dad quite liked his rock on a plate. At least he smiled at it, but he didn't eat it, because he said he'd rather eat eggs from our own hens and bacon from our own pigs at Gum, like he always did. He said that he would rather stick to what he knew, just to be on the safe side.